Hey there, Ride the Car Guy here, and today, let's rebuild a block. We're getting to a super exciting point in the rebuild, and that is the turnaround. So we are going to start rebuilding items and then putting everything back together to eventually get it back in the Titan. Now, of course, it takes a lot of work to get to this point, right? And if you'd like to see that process, check out the upper right-hand corner of your screen where we have a playlist of all the videos leading up to this. But enough talk, I'm really excited. Let's jump into it. We're going to start by removing the drive plate and the signal plate. This is the signal plate. This is for your crank position sensor. It has these little notches in it, basically has a magnet that watches the little notches as it spins by. And then this is your drive plate where the starter slides on and starts the engine. To get this off, we need to take off these bolts. It looks like, what, 8 bolts? And we need to lock this in place. So I'm going to use a flywheel turner. And obviously it'll work the same on a drive plate, right? It's just going to grab the teeth for the starter. And I'm going to lock this in place. We need to turn this left, so I'm going to lock this over here. And effectively, we're just making it so when we start to rotate, it stops it. These are 14 millimeter. And we're going to grab a little socket there. Did I grab the wrong one? There we go. And let's see how this goes. Hold on. I'm grabbing a breaker bar here. Well, it's a jack handle, but there we go. All right. Oops. So that should be loose now. Yep. It just took this giant jack handle and my little mini breaker to make that work. But hey, that's fine. Let's keep going. The catch here is you want to be really careful with this signal plate. You don't want to distort it or smack it or do anything weird like that because you may mess up your signal to the crank position sensor. Now we're cooking with gas here. Awesome. So I'm going to grab a ratchet and back these out. Rotate the engine back. This thing is doing almost nothing. All right, when you get to your last one, rotate this back, pull out your lock here, and then back that last screw off, of course. And then be sure to support the actual plate. And when you take the plate off, luckily this isn't nearly as heavy as a flywheel, but when you take this off, that little center plate comes off with it, and then rotate it, or excuse me, just pull it right off. And it's keyed. It has a little notch. You can actually probably see it right there. It has a little notch there, so I wouldn't worry too much about making sure it's exactly where it needs to be. And when you set this down, make sure you set this down on this side. Don't set it down on the signal plate side. All right, so set that aside and we'll keep going. Next up, we're going to take off our rear oil seal retainer. And so actually, I like this design. It looks like the oil seal is pushed into this actual full retainer, this full plate here. And then there's just got 6 bolts, all 10 millimeter, that hold it in. So it's kind of cool. It is RTV'd to the block, and the bottom has already been removed because that was RTV'd to the upper oil pan. So we just got to loosen these 6 and remove it. Sorry I don't have a better view. I took a picture for you to show you the whole thing, but nothing too crazy here. Just removing the bolts and pulling it off. I was initially worried about this distance going this far out, but now I'm really glad that I did. So the 100 millimeter bolts really worked out well. With all of those off, we just need to support on one side. You're going to have the seal around the back of the crank, but just to be careful. And then they're going to have little areas in which you can pry, and you just want to gently pull it off. Nothing crazy here. There we go. Awesome. There it is, kind of cool. There's your rear seal, and it's in this plate. All right, with that done, I think we're ready to take off our main bearing cap. So let's flip this over and get started on that. So before we start to take this apart, I just wanted to grab a few quick measurements. And I mean, if we're replacing all of the bearings anyways, it doesn't really matter. I'm just more curious than anything to see if it's out of spec. So I'm just grabbing my 0.2, wherever that is, and just seeing my connecting rod clearance. And it looks like they're all over the place. I'm just basically measuring between the side of the connecting rod cap to the side of the crank. So yeah, they're all over the place, and that's fine. You know, I would be worried about it if it's like that after we replace it all. So down the side, you'll notice there's going to be bolts. Those are considered the side bolts. These are called the sub bolts, and then you have the main bolts. So they need to be taken off in a particular order, and starting with the side, then the subs, then the mains. Before you take off your crank, you should be taking out all of your pistons. So we're going to concentrate on those first. And it looks like there might be a fancy bit I'm going to need to get. Let's take a look. So it turns out it's not anything crazy. It's just weird looking because it's the 12-sided, but it's just a 10 millimeter 12-sided bolt. So anyways, what we're going to do is when we want to remove these, we want to have the crankshaft pin in the bottom dead center. So it basically is, we want the piston as far in as possible when we're taking it out. So that way we have, of course, space to move around and pull this off. But also when we push it down, we're not having to push it all the way out of the cylinder just to get the bottom of the connecting rod away from the crank, if that makes sense. So what I'm going to do now that this is upside down, I'm going to spray one more time the inside of my cylinders to make sure that I get as much grime out of it as possible. Because remember, I dropped into it, and now we're going to slide the piston out. So I just want to get it clean one more time. So I'm going to do that, then we're going to start pulling these off. All right, I cleaned those out, and I'm going to grab my bolt for my crank from the harmonic balancer, the crank pulley, turn that all the way in, and that is going to allow us to rotate this. We want to rotate clockwise. I guess it doesn't really matter at this point, but there we go. Should be easy to rotate. And we want bottom dead center, okay? And I think that's it right here, right about there actually. Let's go back just a smidge here. There we go. And I'm going to take them out in order, right? So cylinder one, if it's flipped upright, cylinder one is here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that's how I'm going to take them out. So I know, and I mark them, and I say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and that way they're going to go back into to where they came out. So let's see here. Cylinder one, pull this off. There we go. And it looks like I'm actually going to have to go back a little bit to grab this other bolt. There we go. So both of those are loose. Slide out the other here. And we want to pull this cap off here. How do we want to do that? Let me just try to, yep, there we go. I just push to one side and then push to the other. Basically like this and like that. Pull that out. Set that aside. Ooh, definitely see scoring in there. Interesting. All right, now, funny enough, actually, the manual says to use the back of a hammer, which is kind of funny. So grab that. We're just going to gently tap the hammer to push it away from the journal here, and then push it all the way out. I assume they recommend this method simply because it's wood, right? You're not using a metal implement here. So I'm just going to grab this. Woo, that was very easy. So do not hit it hard. I started out light, and I don't regret it. I pushed it very lightly. There we go. Now it's clear. Perfect. So the other thing that's important is as you're pulling it out, make sure you're not dragging your connecting rod down the side of your cylinder. Let me push a little bit further. And so now it will swing, and let me get a third camera here and show you. We have the connecting rod down there, and then obviously the cylinder's pushed down. You can see the cylinder wall below it, and we just want to make sure, I basically want to lift that up under here and then push it out, so that way we're not dragging it down the cylinder wall. So I'm just pushing it up. It's completely cleared the crank. Bit of a problem. So at this point we have the cylinder, or excuse me, the piston at the very end of the cylinder, but you know we have that ring, that sort of a ring of grime at the end here that we're gonna have to push past. And you want to be careful, again, just be really conscious of your cylinder walls here so you're not scratching those up. I'm going to grab the hammer again and we're going to be super gentle. There we go. So I rested it on the inside of the bearing since we're obviously not doing that anymore. We're not going to use that one. So there we go. Woo, I think we're there. There it goes. All right. So I have that out. Oh. Now that it's out. Perfect. Okay. Once it was far enough out, I stuck my fingers up here and held the connecting rod in place so it would slide out without dragging down the side of the cylinder. And the cylinder looks perfect. All right, very good. So I'm gonna mark this now. Mark this, I'm gonna put the cap back on. I'm gonna mark it as obviously number 1 and then pull the rest of these off. If there's anything different about any other one, I'll let you know and stop and talk about it. Otherwise, let's just blast through it. Okay, so like most things, I probably should have demonstrated on the last cylinder I did. It was actually quite easy. The more that you do it, the easier it becomes. I think, based on my relatively limited knowledge of these things, that the actual crank looks good. As a general rule of thumb, if you run a fingernail across it and you feel ridges, then you have issues. I have a slight ridge right here in between the bearings. I'm not worried about that, but where the bearing actually is going to sit, I felt around and they feel great. The bearings themselves, not so much. I definitely have scoring on my rod bearings, which, you know, that's the whole point of those things, right? They're softer metal. If you know, you're gonna get some contaminants, those will scratch before these will. But regardless, I'm very happy to report that this actually looks really healthy. We're gonna see how it looks once we get the mains off, but other than that, you know, we're in pretty good shape. I also made sure to label all of my pistons and put the caps back on with the corresponding bearings, just so everything's in place. We know where everything went, and we know, you know, you can even go look at the manual. It will tell you what all the cylinder numbers are. So I, however, have some other things to accomplish today, so I'm gonna take a break, come back to this tomorrow, but next up we're gonna take off our main bearings, of course, and pull this crank out. All right, we're back and we're ready to tackle the main bearing, main bearings and the main bearing bolts. So like I said earlier, we have a different sets of bolts and we need to do them in a particular order. We have the side bolts, we have the sub bolts, and then the main bolts, and we remove them in that order. So on your screen is the little map of all of the bolts, and we're going to remove them, well, in the order on the screen. 1 through, what is it, 30? Yeah, so 1 through 30. And so this isn't going to be much more difficult than the rods. It's just a heck of a lot more bolts. So the sides look to be 14. Let me double check. Yep, the sides are 14. The subs are 14, and the main are 17. All these bolts are nice and exposed, so I'm going to grab my big sockets and my breaker bar and then just break them loose in the correct order. All right, side bolts are done. Now moving on to the subs. And then lastly, our mains. Oh boy, different story. All right, now I'll just grab a little power tool just to back them out. I'm going to find a box that will fit these and just set them in there, but they're numbered, so it says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. For some reason that says 4, 4 on the other side, 1, 1, 1, 1. Don't care. It says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so we know that we're in good shape. And it even has an arrow pointing to the front, so we know what direction they go and we know their order. So we're just going to pull these out, and I left 2 bolts in here because they say that in the manual to put them in here, gently rock it back and forth, and they should release. And then I'm just going to throw them in this box. Oh, don't even need to do that. Those are already very loose. I'm going to leave the bearings on, of course. God, I love my job. So number 3 might be a little bit more difficult because your thrust washers are in here. So it might be a little bit tighter. I can get it to rock back and forth, but I'm having trouble pulling it up. So let's do that one last. Come on, baby. Oh, woo. Okay. All right, this one's giving me trouble, but we have the front face. There we go. Front face of it, not the bearing surface, of course, but the front face. There's a little gap there that I could put a plastic scraper in and pop it off. Excellent. And now number 3. And I really want to avoid using the crank itself. I mean, you could probably grab the crank and lift, But I'm gonna rock this back and forth. And there is these little gaps here. You can probably see that on the camera. There's a little gap there that I can maybe, put something in and sort of pull up. It's just hard to get because you just have your little fingers on a flat, oily surface to pull up. But when I continue rocking back and forth, yeah, I'll grab something. Give me a second. I'm gonna keep using these plastic pieces just because it's not wise to use a bunch of metal stuff in here. And I'm just shoving it down in between here and lifting up. There we go. Is that better? It's getting there. Man, that's a tight squeeze. Tolerances are very low. So is my tolerance. Oh yeah, there's progress. Come on. All right, so it's slowly starting to come up here. Hoping you can see that gap. I think you can right there. Actually, let's turn this. Rocking back and forth. There we go. Ah, man. What a pain in the ass that's being. Grabbing another plastic piece here, pushing that in. There we go. Woo! Finally got it released. All right, so these little thrust washers, I want you to think of them as sort of like shims, because that's exactly what they are. And there is oil grooves, and the oil grooves sit on the crank side on both sides. And then the other side is flat. So that's how we're going to put them back in. And these are probably fine. They're also on the bottom as well, it looks like. But I bought new ones just because why not? They're just a couple bucks. But just take note of the orientation of how they're installed. All right, so we'll remove those, and now we can lift our crank out. Now you want to have a safe place to set this, and between the last few videos, well, it's dirty again. It's got a bunch of stuff on it, but I cleaned my whole workbench off and put new plastic on because it was getting pretty funky. But regardless, just have a safe place to set it, and then pull it out. There we go. All right. It's not light, but it's not unmanageably heavy either. And I think one of the thrust washers are stuck on there. Where's it at? Yeah, it is. All right. Fine. Don't care. There we go. And I'm going to take the bearings out. And again, you would want to make sure that they're in the right orientation if you're reusing them. I don't know why you would ever do that. But yeah, pull them out, set them with the corresponding pair, and then we'll keep going. Now yesterday when I was doing the first portion of this video, I was contemplating whether or not I was going to get this block professionally cleaned. And the more I look at it, the more I really want to get it done. And of course, I reached out to my buddy Zach Calvin. If you haven't seen his channel, go check it out in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. But he hooked me up with someone right down the street that can do this. So I'm going to take this off. There's a couple things we need to do to prep. We need to finally take off those knock sensors I've been talking about. And there's a couple seals for antifreeze that we want to remove before we send it off. But I'm going to send it over there, get it all nice and beautiful, and then it's going to come back and we'll be able to be sort of comfortable reassembling it knowing that there's no junk anywhere. I am going to do a little bit of scraping though. I'll take this RTV off the bottom just to be a nice guy, I guess. But we're going to do that, and then once it comes back, we're going to build it back up. Now the seals we need to remove are, there's one here. This one we pulled out before actually when we emptied the block of antifreeze earlier. So we have that one. There's two up front and one in the rear. And when we do these, we want to make sure that we buy new washers and replace the washers because they're one-time use. They look like copper or brass or something, washers. So pull those off and then pull the knock sensors and we're ready to go. The three near the front are H12. So we'll grab that bit and probably a breaker bar, I assume. Woo! Those are on there. Got to think of a new plan here. There we go. Wasn't too bad. Man, that was hard all the way out. There we go. Perfect. These are covered in oil, so maybe we'll have some luck here. Oh yeah, way easier. Good. So that one, let's break this one loose here. This one, I mean, this one I can frickin' see the threads through the top hole. What the hell am I doing? Looks like both of these you can. Why am I even taking these off? Whatever, let's just do it. All right, one more on the rear. And that's not a 12. I think that might be a 8. Yeah, this one's a 10 here, so. All right. Oops. Knock sensors looking like a 12. Where's my 12? I'm assuming that the sensor's out here and it just screws into the block here, so let's find out. Hopefully it'll be nice and easy for us. Yeah. Excellent. There we go. Back those out. We tape those off, set it aside. My dudes, we have officially, as long as you don't count these studs, have run out of things to unscrew from the block. So I'm super thrilled to be at this point. This is we're going to call this the official turnaround point because now, like I said, we've run out of things to take out. We have to start putting stuff back on. So I'm going to go get this cleaned. I'm going to back this off. This should be, I mean, can I carry this? Yeah, it looks like I should be able to carry it. I'm going to get my engine hoist, support this just so I can unscrew it from the stand, throw it in my Xterra, get it cleaned, and then bring it back, and away we go. I did notice I tweaked a dowel pin right here. This one's tweaked. I'm going to knock that back in. There we go. Not good for it, but whatever. All right, my dudes, we need to talk. A lot has gone on since I dropped the block off at the machine shop. And my original intention for this video series, at least this portion of it, was to have one concentrating on the block, so the tear down, the cleaning, the measuring, and the rebuild of the block, and then a tear down, cleaning, measuring, and rebuild of the heads, and then obviously reassembling it after that. Now, it occurred to me after purchasing all this fancy measuring equipment and buying all these micrometers and bore gauges that even if I found something that was out of spec, what the hell was I going to do about it? So you guys know my workshop. I don't have CNC and lathe and all the fancy equipment that machine shops have to actually repair any issues that I might find. That, and I simply don't have that skill. So I've never done it before. It's something that, in my opinion, is far too risky to do on an engine I need to depend on, especially for my first time, even if I did have the equipment. So, that being said, here's the new game plan. We're going to end this video here. This is going to be sort of the teardown of the block, and we're going to call that done. I'm going to take my heads as well and bring them to the machine shop and have them go through everything. The valve seats, the oil seals, make sure that the clearances are correct, everything. So it's kind of tough for me. I generally don't like to send out things to other people and have them work on it, but again, you guys know why I'm doing it, because I just simply can't do it myself. I do still want to show you how to do some measurements that the manual lays out to make sure that things are okay. So my plan is to wait until everything is redone and then back to me, and then once it's back to me, I'll just make a video on my second channel on how to take the measurements of the head and some of the stuff inside of in the block as well. That's going to free up time for me to do other projects, like cleaning up the parts and getting them ready for reassembly, and of course working on the Titan with the engine out of it, make sure that gets figured out. So I appreciate your flexibility. I know we're kind of calling an audible here and making a couple changes, but all in all, I'm still very excited, and I'm especially excited to not have to deal with those heads, if I'm being completely honest. So we're gonna get that figured out, and then we're just gonna keep on trucking. Hopefully, this is a weird season for them. They're taking a lot of time off, obviously, it's the end of the year, and that's great, but I don't know how long this is going to take. So they said a couple weeks, possibly. So we may have to figure out some things to do in the meantime, maybe pull the Xterra out and do some stuff with that. But regardless, thank you so much for sticking around. If you like this video, please go ahead and scroll down and hit that like button. Be sure to subscribe for more content like this. If you really like this video and feel like it saved you some time or some money, you can go ahead and scroll down and send me a tip using the super thanks button down below. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one.